Welcome to Small Cap Nation. I'm Remy Blaire in San Francisco. It's day 2 of the BioTech Showcase and the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference. I'll be speaking with several companies and bringing you the latest updates. I'm joined by John McCamant, who's the editor of MTSL, which is also bioinvest.com. John, thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure to be here, Remy.
Okay, John, so U.S. markets have closed, and it's been a bloodbath for overseas markets. But in terms of U.S. markets, the equity averages closed on a mixed note. But over in the biotech sector, we saw a sell-off. So what do you make of today's action?
Well, particularly from a biotech perspective, we really have this is our 6th straight down day to start the year. In particular, this is a risk-on sector, so we really need investors to have a bit of a more risk-on appetite. When you combine the fall or the 12-year low in oil, the international market problems, we really ran into a situation today in particular where it may be capitulation, but there were just not enough buyers. We had a lot of volume in some of the relative small to mid-cap names in a space, but when you're one of your true market cap leaders, Celgene, disappoints at least on the earnings outlook, and at one point was down over 8%, maybe 9% on a very large cap company. That really puts a lot of fear into investors, and that was the primary driver of the markets today. And we know in the big picture, fear and greed are the primary drivers.
And John, you mentioned earnings. Of course, investors will be paying attention to that, but they'll also be paying attention to IPOs as well as mergers and acquisitions. We got the announcement of Shire's buyout of Bexalta finally today. But in terms of trends, what do you see on the horizon?
Well, we would like to see another large buyout. We haven't had that in the space for a while. The Bexalta Shire has already been talked about and kind of actually factored in. Something along the lines of the Onyx Amgen a couple years ago, but something that really comes in and shows that there's real value being created and also gets investors excited again and points out some of the underlying values. And as regards to the IPOs, that may be it for a while. I mean, they filed last week, but this is a very difficult tape, and it's one thing we know in biotech is that they're generally going to bank till basically to the very end, and they're going to bank to the puke. They're just going to throw these things out there, and I think we may have hit a saturation point in the sector, at least for raising new money for now.
And last but not least, in your newsletter, MTSL, you and your partner always talk about companies that are in the pipeline in terms of FDA filings or approvals or any upcoming decisions. So what are you paying attention to?
We don't see any big FDA approvals near term. What we were looking at was probably going to be pipeline. Again, one of the hotter areas last year was immune oncology, where people were focused a lot on CAR T type technologies, which are more personalized therapy. I think this year we're going to see more of the combinations of the PD-1 or some of these Keytruda and Opdivo, and with the other follow-on cancer drugs. It's not always going to be these CAR Ts, but maybe it's 3 or 4 different cancer drugs we already have, a couple on the market and some in development. We're going to see more and more combinations. Incyte, INCY, announced 3 or 4 different types of collaborations within their pipeline doing this exact combinations of different immune oncology cancer drugs.
Okay, John, well, thank you so much for your time and insight today.
My pleasure, Remy.
Joining me now is Robin Smith, and he's CEO of Origin. Good afternoon, and thanks you so much for joining me.
Yep, thanks for having me.
Well, your company is a pre-public biopharma company, so could you tell me in detail what you guys do and what's in the pipeline?
Sure. What we do is we make induced pluripotent stem cells out of people's blood. So what we ask is for individuals and patients and the general public to basically contribute a teaspoon of their blood to us. We take that blood and then we convert it into induced pluripotent stem cells using 4 gene factors that were discovered in Japan by Shinya Yamanaka back in 2007. He won the Nobel Prize for that in 2010. And we licensed that technology from IPS Academia Japan as part of our platform. What we do with those cells is we take those into our bank and we basically build a large repository of those cells for use in diagnosing and modeling rare genetically inherited diseases. So one of the most interesting facts about induced pluripotent stem cells is they actually recapitulate the disease. And what I mean by that is if we were to take your blood, for instance, and take a teaspoon of your blood, we can reprogram it back into stem cells, which are 3 days old. And then from those cells, we can grow your heart cells outside of your body. And when we grow your heart cells, they actually start beating just like your heart. And so if you had a genetically inherited disease such as long QT syndrome, where your heart skipped a beat or became elongated from between the Q and T cycles, that would actually happen in a petri dish, and we can actually look at that. We can then do things like use drugs or various different other types of therapeutics against those cells to see what works best and what's most effective for you.
And Robin, now that you've given us an overview of what the company itself does, can you give us an idea of the financials and if you've done any financing recently?
Yeah, so I'll go into kind of our fundraising history to date. Myself and Kate Blanchard are the co-founders of the company. We funded the company initially with our own capital for about a year and a half as we were getting established. And then back in February of 2015, we closed a small seed round of financing of $3.1 million. We followed that along in December of 2015, which is just a few months later, with a Series A round of $12.5 million. So we're just off of that round now and scaling up our operations.
And Robin, since we are at a biotech conference and it's only the beginning of 2016, what are some trends you're seeing in the overall healthcare as well as biotech space?
Yeah, it's really interesting. A lot of biotech and healthcare companies are talking about access to patients and patient advocacy and really getting patients involved more closely. And one of the most fascinating aspects about our organization is that we touch and interact with, not just metaphorically, but literally, we actually put our hands on patients every week and take blood from them and get blood samples. So that's really important for us to have that direct connection to those consumers and patients directly. We think that that trend is going to continue because as people look for more efficacious treatments, more personalized treatments, we think having that access to patients is really important. The other thing that we see as a trend is this whole burgeoning world of regenerative medicine. There's an industrial revolution going on right now around this ability to reprogram cells and tease out different ways of growing tissues for individuals from their own cells. And we think that's a really important area for us to invest in and for our organization to be, pioneering.
And before I let you go, since you did mention some key points there, I do want to ask you about gene editing and some of the hurdles that faces in terms of regulation. What do you think will happen in the near future?
Near future is a good question. I think I definitely think gene editing and editing cells is very important. I think it's another one of the industrial revolution trends that are going to happen in biotechnology. Personally, from our organization's perspective, we see gene editing happening on persons' own diseased tissues so that it gives them a chance to actually put their tissues back in their body or treatments or therapeutics that could help them. I think that's many years away. I think the approach of personalized medicine and gene editing is, a good 5 to 10 years, but it's going to happen. It's inevitable. I hope that our country and the U.S. is, going to spearhead that effort, and we really need to think about the policies that are going to be implemented to actually enable our organization and other organizations like us to innovate and move as quickly as possible.
Okay, Robin, well, thank you so much for joining me, and thanks for all your insight.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, thanks for having us.
Straight ahead, we head across the pond for a look at what's happening in the European markets when Small Cap Nation comes right back.
Guys, I got the jerseys. Oh, nice. El Nino. Aquí. Spray Dan.
Oh, yeah.
Don Ovan.
Think that's me?
You guy. It's $40. Can you cover that?
I'll send it to you right now. Done.
Okay, got it. So hat-trick Rick, he's the best player on our team. You get the ball, you give it to him.
Great. Rick.
On your phone, online, on the go, Wells Fargo makes it easy to get banking done.
All right, Don, you're on. Nope, just kidding.
Doug, you've been staring at that for a while, huh? Listen, TD Ameritrade has former floor traders to help walk you through that complex trade, so you'll be confident enough to do what you want. I'll pull up their number. Blammo. Let's get those guys on the horn. Ooh. Looks like it is time to upgrade your phone, Douglas.
For all the confidence you need, TD Ameritrade. You got this.
Let's go, Serena. Fight, fight. Come on, fight.
Back to the top. Here we go. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Whoa, stop. Let's go back. 1, 2. Whoa, we're going to stop there. I bet we can do it even better.
It took tennis legend Serena Williams, fencing champion Tim Morehouse, and the world-famous Rockettes years to master their craft. But it took them only moments to master paying bills at Chase.com, depositing checks at Chase ATMs, and transferring funds on the mobile app. Technology designed for you, so you can easily master the way you bank.
With all the interest in the JP Morgan BioTech conference in San Francisco, we thought it'd be interesting to have a brief look at the range of small cap biotech in Europe. There are some 50 companies listed under the BioTech heading on the London AIM, and another 25 listed on the Euronext Autonext. We've covered a number of IPOs in this field over the last few months. The companies cover a whole range of in the industry, from very small, highly focused, specialized research activity companies through a broad range of research and development to a generalized pharma, distribution and specialized support companies. We are today going to look briefly at a company from each end of the range. From the Euronext Autonext, first of all, we have Nanobiotics. Now, we've talked about nanoparticles before in an engineering sense. This company is applying the technology to fighting cancer, interestingly. And Nanobiotics is a pioneer and leader in nanomedicine and has developed a revolutionary approach to the local treatment of cancer. The company focuses its effort on the development of its products portfolio, which of course are entirely patented, nano X-ray innovation based on the physical mode of action of nanoparticles under the action of radiation, allowing maximizing absorption of X-rays inside cancer cells without increasing the dose received by the healthy surrounding tissue. Nano X-ray products are compatible with standard radiotherapy treatment, are intended to treat a wide range of cancers via different routes of administration. In addition to its currently vast clinical development program, the company has started to explore the use of a product it calls NBTXR3. I'm sure it'll have a better name before it comes to market, for combination in immuno-oncology. This product is a radio enhancer using the physical mode action to destroy cancer cells in solid tumors in association with radiotherapy. Nanobiotics is running a global clinical development program with its lead product NBTXR3 in 6 indications across Europe, US and Asia Pacific, a registration trial in soft tissue sarcoma, and phase 1-2 trials in liver cancers, prostate cancer, head and neck cancer and rectal cancer. In Asia by Nanobiotics partner Pharma Engine. Elsa Borghi, Nanotech's medical director, comments, with 6 ongoing indications, our global clinical development of the product as a radio enhancer is progressing well. This immuno-oncology program could bring new applications and confirm that additional patient populations could benefit from the treatment with NBTXR3. Our second company is from the other end of the range. It has a supporting role. Clinical trials are a major challenge for all companies in the pharma business, but especially for small biotechs, as they require a large number of specialized resources both to undertake the trial and to produce the data required afterwards. From the London AIM, we have the Venn Life Sciences, which offers a broad range of services to its clients to provide capacity and experience in clinical trial management, working with their sponsors to keep their studies on time and within budget. Venn Life Sciences is a clinical research organisation European-wide, providing clinical trial management and resourcing solutions to pharmaceutical, biotechnology, medical devices and academic organisations, with dedicated operations in France, Germany, the Netherlands, the UK and Ireland, and wide European representation. It specialises in multi-site, cross-cultural clinical trials with a unique knowledge of local and EU regs. Over their 25-year history, they've built up a substantial therapeutic and study experience, contributing to the efficient management of sites, budgets and communication channels with all the parties involved. It is renowned for its hands-on approach and consistent delivery of high-quality work on time and budget. From identifying, screening and qualifying investigative sites, through providing project management expertise of conducting complex study in extensive therapeutic areas and phases across Europe, with a project management team that is carefully chosen with the client needs in mind, depending on the locations, therapeutic area, phase experience, local language and regulatory knowledge. And their regulatory and clinical teams have extensive experience of different activities required across European countries in order to undertake trials in line with national guidelines, so as to ensure that they are there for their clients for all critical events, and with IT systems that back up their dedicated process so that the sponsor has all the relevant information to hand when needed. This is just a small sample, obviously, either side of the range of activities undertaken by the European small cap companies in this sector. There are many more doing wide range of activities. And that's it from Graham Brown, Small Cap Nation Europe today.
Good. Very good. You see something moving off the shelves and your first thought is to investigate the company. You are type E. Yes, investment opportunities can be anywhere. Or not. But you know the difference.
E-Trade's barcode scanner. Shorten the distance between intuition and action. E-Trade. Opportunity is...
Before they sat down, one more time, just for themselves. Before the last grandchild graced the stage. Before Katie and her husband hit that rough patch. Before Kevin finally came home and the first grandchild arrived. Before the sons-in-law, daughters-in-law, and Brad's brief brush with the law. Before the second British invasion. Before Katie, Debbie, Kevin, and Brad. Before they became a family. There was a connection that started it all and made the future the wonderful thing it turned out to be. We know we're not the center of your life, but we'll do our best to help you connect to what is.
Sometimes the present looked bright, sometimes romantic. There were tears in my eyes, and tears in my eyes. And so many little things that we learned were really the biggest things. Through it all, we saved and had a retirement plan, and someone who listened and helped us along the way. Because we always knew that someday the future would be the present.
Every someday needs a plan. Talk with us about your retirement today.
All right, we're here with Don Steinbruch again, the founder and managing partner of Agecroft Partners, and we've got a brand new year, Don. It's been a crazy year, 2015, for hedge funds, and you make an interesting point about how hedge funds have to adapt to this changing environment. So let's go through some of your top 10 things that you think 2016 holds for hedge funds. We'll start with reduction of expected returns for a diversified hedge fund portfolio. What do you mean by that?
Well, what I mean by that is hedge funds get their returns from two sources. One is alpha or manager skill, picking undervalued securities, and the other is their market exposure. You know, hedge funds have different market exposure depending on how much they hedge. And since 2009, those with the most market exposure have benefited because the equity and fixed income markets have gone straight up. Going forward, most investors are not expecting a lot of return from the markets because valuations of both the bond and equity markets are close to all-time highs. Fed's going to raise interest rates. So in 2009, they expected about a 15% return from their hedge fund portfolio. In 2014, it had gone down to 10%. Right now, most hedge fund investors are looking at a 7 to 8% return on a diversified hedge fund portfolio, which still looks pretty good relative to the fixed income markets.
Interesting. Okay, greater demand for hedge fund strategies with low correlations to long-only benchmarks.
So what's happened is that the reduction in returns is going to cause a dramatic shift in the demand for various hedge fund strategies. Those hedge fund strategies with a lot of market exposure got most of the assets over the past 5 years, and you're going to begin to see a lot of investors take money off the table and invest in hedge fund strategies that are not correlated with the equity or fixed income market. Strategies like relative value fixed income, equity market neutral, which we spoke about on your show before, CTAs, global macro, volatility, you know, any type of strategy that is not dependent on the market, that can protect during a market sell-off, you're going to see money flowing into in 2016.
Okay. Increased hedge fund marketing activity outside of the U.S.
Well, what happened over the past few years is the Eurozone has put in legislation requiring hedge fund managers to register in each individual country throughout the Eurozone in order to sell there. Before that, hedge fund managers could just go wherever they wanted, and you know, roughly 30% of the assets that they raised came out of Europe. When this legislation was passed, you began to see a significant number of hedge funds stop marketing outside the U.S. What did that do? It made the U.S. market much more competitive because the 30% of the time they were outside the U.S. are now focusing on the U.S. Plus, the U.S. Investors represent about 60% of assets flown into hedge funds. Hedge funds all over the world are focused on the U.S. U.S. marketplace is very competitive. I think you're going to see a reverse of that trend. I think you're going to begin to see U.S. hedge fund managers going back to Europe. Much easier to raise assets, not as difficult to register in those countries as they thought it would be.
Interesting. Okay. Hedge fund industry assets to reach an all-time high in 2016.
Yeah, that may be a surprise if you read most newspapers, because most news about the hedge fund industry is very negative. They talk about a lot of name brand hedge funds have closed down recently. You know, their performance is in 2016 was close to flat. But the reality is there's not a lot of alternatives for investors to invest in. A lot of people are worried about the fixed income marketplace. You know, the aggregate bond index right now is yielding about 3%. If interest rates go up, it could post negative returns. You know, equity markets are close to their all-time highs. So you're going to see some investors taking money out of fixed income, investing it in hedge funds. You're going to see some people taking money out of the equity markets, putting in hedge funds. You know, now is when hedge funds should do well. When the markets are doing great, you can get market exposure by buying an index fund at a very low fee. When markets aren't expected to do well, you want strategies that are hedged, that are not correlated to the markets.
That's when they earn their money, I guess.
This is when they should earn their money. Yes. That's correct.
Okay, smaller managers will outperform. That's interesting.
So if markets are going up, large managers can do very well just by having market exposure. But if the market isn't going up and most of your return has to come from security selection, smaller managers have an advantage. And that's because if you get too big, it's very hard to add value through security selection, because investing in smaller illiquid securities, you can't put a lot of money in them. You know, they become less and less a percent of your portfolio, so they get diluted over a very, very large asset base. So smaller managers focusing on niches should have a distinct return advantage over large managers that have gotten too big.
Okay. Pension funds reducing the average size of managers they allocate to, so you don't have to have billions and billions to get the attention of a pension fund?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. Pension funds are going through an evolution of how they invest in hedge funds. They first invested in fund of funds, which were basically a fund that invested in a diversified portfolio of hedge funds. Then they hired an institutional investment consultant, and they tended to buy the largest hedge funds with the strongest brands. They were more concerned about headline risk than generating the highest return possible through their hedge fund portfolio. As they get more experience, they build out their internal staff, and they begin to focus on hedge funds that they think are going to generate the highest returns, and that tends to be small to mid-sized managers. So it used to be you had to have $5 billion in AUM to get money from a pension fund. Today it's about $750 million, and that dollar amount is going down over time.
Okay, high quality marketing essential for asset growth.
You know, the market's changed dramatically. Early last decade, if you had good numbers and you put them in a database, investors came. Matter of fact, you could be cocky, you could not give them a lot of information, you could throw them out, you know, if you didn't like them, and the whole market has changed. If you have good numbers today, if you're in the top 10% highest returning hedge fund managers, you're in an exclusive group of 1,500 managers. So to get money in the hedge fund industry today, you not only have to have a great product with great performance that ranks well across each evaluation factor investors use, but you have to go out and meet with people, because if you don't, assets just aren't flowing.
Interesting. Okay, continued pressure on fees. Is there some negotiation room on fees that we haven't seen in the past?
There's a lot of pressure on fees. You know, now that there are 15,000 hedge funds out there, institutional investors are aggressively negotiating fees on large mandates that they give. They're often getting at least a 25% discount on standard fees. Smaller hedge funds are having a very difficult time raising money, and you know, they're basically getting squeezed from two different aspects, from the revenue side and from the fee side. They're often having to offer what is called founder share, which is a 25 to 50% discount off standard fees. You're also seeing a number of hedge fund managers turn to 40 Act funds or mutual funds, which have significantly lower fees than standard hedge funds. So a lot of pressure on fees. It's not going to go away. You're going to see hedge fund fees come down over time.
Wow, whole new world. Okay, more hedge funds shutting down.
Yeah, I think in 2016 you're going to see an all-time high number of hedge funds shutting down, and there's a number of reasons. First of all, the number of hedge funds are at all-time high. So if you have a consistent number or percent of hedge funds shutting down each year, by definition you should have all-time record this year. But in addition to that, you know, with 15,000 hedge funds, the average quality of hedge funds is a lot lower today than it used to be. There are a lot of lower quality hedge funds out there. Their close rate's going to be a lot higher than what you've seen historically. In addition to that, I'm expecting a lot of volatility in the marketplace, and volatility increases the number of hedge funds shutting down. Reason being, if you don't have a lot of volatility, performance tends to be pretty close across hedge funds versus various strategies. Volatility increases the dispersion of returns between good and bad managers. And when you have a big dispersion of return, ones with bad performance gets fired, and that money is reinvested in better performing managers. And then finally, what I just mentioned, smaller managers are getting squeezed on both sides. Okay. You know, their fees that they're able to charge are a lot less than what they used to be. In addition, they're having to look more institutional. They're having to hire more people, hire more systems. And as a result of that, you're going to unfortunately see a number of these small managers just not raise assets and go out of business.
It's tough to make money in that kind of environment. Okay, finally, number 10, blurring the lines between hedge funds and private equity funds. We've kind of been seeing a little bit of that over the past few years, it seems like.
Yeah, you really have. You know, back in 2008, really the difference between some private equity funds and some hedge funds was really the structure of the fund. You know, how long you had to commit your money, how often you could get your money out. You know, there were private equity funds and hedge funds investing in the same illiquid fixed income strategies, and back in 2008, those hedge funds got in big trouble because they were given monthly liquidity, the securities they're investing in were not liquid, And when people wanted their money, they just couldn't give it. So they had to suspend redemptions, put up gates. You know, today, because of where interest rates are, you're seeing a lot of interest in less liquid strategies that have higher yields. And so these hedge funds are beginning to put in structures very similar to private equity. So there's a blurring of the lines between private equity and hedge funds. You're going to see a lot more money going into things like private loans, reinsurance, and other strategies that are less liquid, but they're going to have longer lockups and less liquidity provisions than they did historically.
Okay, interesting. It's already been an interesting start to the year for those in the financial industry. It looks like it's going to get even more so. Thank you so much, Don, for sharing these thoughts about the hedge funds in 2016.
It's my pleasure.